I'm excited that we have an expert with us today and a special guest. I want to introduce Jen Foldbury, who's here to share some insights on how to best navigate junior year. Jen is a college consultant at Educational Connections. She's a former associate director of admissions at the University of Toledo, and she's also a former high school college guidance counselor and a classroom teacher. Jen, you've really seen it from all sides of the desk here.
I really have. I
Thank you
really
so
have,
much for
Renee.
joining us today. I'm excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do working with students day to day?
Sure. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So just like you, Renee, I work with students from 8th through 12th grade. And with my younger students, I really help them guide them, with their course selections. I give advice on standardized testing, and we start to build their college narrative. And then with my juniors and seniors, we focus more on things like building their college lists, the application process, the essay writing, and all those great things that come a little bit later in the process. So every student has different needs, and so I meet each student where they're at, and we kind of go from there.
Perfect. That sounds great, Jen. I want to address one quick question that came through in the chat asking about whether this was for parents or for students, because I did mention students a little bit just a minute ago. And yes, the majority of people that are on the Zoom today are parents, because obviously many of the students are in school. But this is something you should feel very comfortable sharing with your student as well once you receive the recording of it, because it can be good information for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen, let's just talk broad first. What are you seeing as trends in college applications right now?
All right. Well, this is a great chart, okay, because it really shows the dramatic increase in the number of applications schools are receiving. You can see that the big climb started during COVID when many schools went test optional. So if you look at the growth in the first year applications since the 2019-2020 admission season, you can actually see that. The main reason for this jump in applications was the transition of so many colleges to test optional policies. And also the ease of the Common App being Common Application, which is for those who are not familiar, it's a general application that many colleges, most colleges use now, where students fill out the one main part of the application and it goes to all of the colleges that they add to their list. So it really makes it a lot easier. They're not repeating, entering all this information in for each college that they're applying for. Because it was so easy, many students applied to more schools because it was just, it was easy to do. During the 2024-2025 admission cycle, there were more than 10 million applications submitted at schools that use the Common Application, which is nearly double the amount that was submitted in the 2019-2020 season. So you can see, what has happened is schools are seeing a significant increase in the number of applications, which is making it more competitive now to gain admission.
I absolutely agree, Jen. And what's interesting is in working with students myself, I would say, the average number of schools students apply to, even 5 to 7 years ago was like 6 to 8. And then it became 8 to 10, and then it became 10 to 12. So I think the numbers, just the averages for students are really increasing. Are you seeing the same thing with your students as well?
Oh yeah, I just had a senior apply to 22 colleges. And I'm
I
like,
have,
wow, you have to remember also there's application fees attached to these. So that was
right,
a lot of
right.
money to do. But
I
just
agree. I had a student apply to 26. That was the highest
wow.
number that I've ever had. But a number of them were UC schools as well in California. So again, a different application process that you and I will work with quite a bit. But it is sort of interesting to see that trend. I normally tell students 10 to 12, and I have some reasons for that when I think about reach, match, and likely schools, which I know we're going to talk about things like that throughout this week. But I sort of think right now that's a good number. Do you say the same number?
I say just about the same number.
Good,
It of
good.
course depends on the student, but usually roughly right around there.
Correct. Yes, great. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is what colleges are actually looking for. You worked in an admissions office, so you know what characteristics colleges are looking for in a student application. So can you share some of that information with us so families know, like once that application is received, what's actually happening with it?
Right. And I love your graphic up there because, everybody always knows grades, your classes that your GPA, your grades, your rigor of courses is going to be the most, that's what they look at first. Well, I shouldn't say that. Not every college looks at that first, but that's usually the common thing that most colleges look at. That's where they start. Sometimes they look at test scores, sometimes they don't because of those test optional schools. But they want, can be so many school or students that apply with very similar GPAs, very similar test scores, very similar
Right.
courses and grades. So they've got to have something that helps them stand out above that. So they're really looking at, the student's narrative. They're looking at their extracurricular activities and they're looking at depth of engagement in these activities. They're also looking at their essays. Many colleges require or as use an essay as optional, but we always encourage our students to use it anyways, to write the essay
Hmm.
anyway, because it shows their authentic character. And that's what sets you apart from other applicants.
I agree. And I think you're right on when you talk about academics and program rigor being at the base of this. As a past admissions counselor, this is not actually what I would read first, but I actually do feel it's the foundation of the application. And I think that that's an important piece to talk about. I like this graphic because I think it really emphasizes to the student that their program and their academic rigor and the courses they're taking is really the foundation. And what it is showing that you can be successful in the classes, but also that you have the ability to be successful in college. And that's really what admissions officers are looking at. Has this student shown me that they can be successful in the college coursework at our college?
One
Um,
thing I want to add too, not to interrupt, and I
oh, no,
didn't mention
sure,
this earlier, they look at recommendation letters from teachers as well. So they want
sure,
to know what kind of student you're going to be, what kind of student you are in the classroom now and what you're going to bring to them to their campus. So,
absolutely.
teachers and their recommendation letters, they can talk about, your engagement in the classroom. Are you participating? They want to know what kind of student you're going to be as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm. Good thought. So when you're working with a student, I do this when I'm working with my students. I'd love to hear what kind of, advice do you give students when they're reviewing their own transcript? What should they be looking for or thinking about as far as course selection, which is, happening this time of year?
And I really do think it's important for students to get a copy of their transcript and look at it for themselves before they submit it to the college. They want to know what the colleges are getting.
Yes.
Ideally, every student should have and most of these are graduation requirements anyway for many schools. Ideally, 4 years of English, 4 years of math. Some schools only require 3 years of science. If you're looking at a competitive school, 4 years of science, 4 years of social studies. And really, a lot of students say, "Oh, I've got my, 2 or 3 years of required foreign language. I can stop now." But if it's a rigorous, if it's a more competitive school and they're looking at a rigorous course schedule, taking that foreign language all the way through can really make a difference. And then, of course, there's, like a year of the arts as well. So, but not only that, students need to challenge themselves in advanced level classes if they're ready. They want to see, that you're not just taking the easy way out. You could have a 4.0 GPA or a 4.8 GPA or whatever, and just be taking, the easiest classes. They want to see you challenge yourself, especially in an area where you might be majoring. So if you're, majoring in some kind of STEM field, you're going to want to go heavier on those math and science courses. That's going to make a big difference to them. The most important thing to remember is colleges are looking at your transcript from the end of junior year. Okay. That's when the transcript is sent to the colleges because you're applying your senior year, fall of your senior year, right? So there's nothing else to send at that point. So they're looking at ninth through 11th grade. But I like to also mention that senior year is still also important. Many colleges will want to see what classes you're taking when you fill out your application. They're going to ask you to list your senior year courses. And many colleges will require a mid-year report with a transcript. So at the end of their first semester of senior year, and then a final transcript as well at the end of senior year. And we've seen it before where admissions has been revoked because a student has not followed through throughout their senior year. So senior year is still important.
I agree. I can't tell you how many times when I was in admissions, I would read an application and the student maybe was like on an upward trend or maybe had a dip in grades junior year. And I would hold them and look at senior year grades to give them one more shot to show me that they could be successful. And many times the students didn't even know that I had reached out to the school asking for those grades. So I always say, don't take your foot off the gas, like keep going right into senior year like it's any other year. I see a couple questions coming in the Q&A, and thank you for putting them in there. We will address those at the end, so I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring them. But if anyone has any additional questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we will address them in just a bit. Okay, in addition to transcripts, I know you touched on this a little bit already. Testing is also can be a significant component in some students' applications. And it's a good way to show academic potential if you scored well. We're going to have an in-depth conversation about this on Wednesday. But Jen, do you want to cover some highlights about the topic of testing?
Sure. So I sometimes have my students ask me, if so many schools are test optional, why do I need to take the ACT or the SAT? And, whether or not a student considers standardized test scores for admission decisions, they still rely on test scores for course placement, scholarship offers, and other purposes. So it's always good to have a score. If a student takes their first ACT or SAT in the fall of their junior year, or even earlier, it gives them a baseline score and a longer runway to add additional tests to try for a higher score. So I usually don't recommend taking a standardized test until the student has at least taken Algebra 2, because they'll have a lot more coursework under their belt and be a little bit more comfortable with the test. Now, having said that, if your student is a junior and hasn't taken a test yet, please don't panic. This is perfectly fine. Now is a really good time to start. I would have them consider, registering for the March SAT or the April ACT, because they still will have some time to take another one in the summer. Okay. As far as prep goes, you can really start prepping as early as possible. I usually tell my students, they can start prepping usually between sophomore and junior year. And there's lots of different ways to prep. There's all kinds of resources online. Also, Educational Connections offers test prep as well. I know Pete is going to go through all this later in the week, so he'll expand more on that.
Right. I think that's some good advice, Jen. I know Pete is really an expert in this area. I always love presenting with Pete. I learn something from him every time. So I'm looking forward to Wednesday. Here are the dates. We have them up so you can see when they are available. I actually just met with a student last night who just signed up for March and said his high school location was filled, so he needed to go to another high school. So if you are considering March, I would start looking at that. But you're right. Even if you're a junior, like now's the time to get going. And my big push when I'm talking to students and their juniors is I'm okay with you taking the testing in spring of your junior year if that works best for you, especially if you are just taking Algebra 2 this year. But I strongly encourage students to have all of their SAT and ACT testing done before they start school in the fall of senior year.
Right.
Trying to take additional testing, college applications in senior year, that's just a recipe for exhaustion.
A lot.
So the earlier, the better. Plan ahead. Okay. So let's talk about passions. And, this sort of is coming up more and more. And we're switching gears from testing to sort of the other side and start talking about personal narrative and how students can really make their applications stand out. So how do you help students find their passions or what they might be interested in?
So one of the first things I ask my students when I first meet them is, what makes you happy? What are your passions? What are your hobbies? There's a section on almost every college application that asks about your extracurriculars. And admission officers want to see how you spend your time outside of school. Okay, you're not just going home and getting on TikTok for, 4 hours or whatever it is that these kids do nowadays. They don't want to see a list of clubs that you've joined, but only attend a meeting or two. Okay. They want to know that you're engaged, that you've shown leadership. I have a student once, this is when I worked at the high school. I had a student who she started right off the bat freshman year, and she wanted to join every club that was available at the high school because she thought this is what colleges want to see, right? She joined every club, stuff that she wasn't even interested in, just because she wanted to add all that to her college application. Well, by the time she got to junior year and we started talking about, diving into the whole college planning piece, she was exhausted, first of all, because she just kept trying to go to all these meetings, but nothing was really that meaningful to her. She was just doing it because she felt like she had to. So, I always tell my students it's more about quality than quantity. Okay. The Common Application will give you 10 spots to fill to put in your extracurriculars. You don't have to use all 10 spots. Um, you know, there's a section on the Common App also right after you list your activities where they want you to record the average hours a week and weeks per year you spend on every activity. That's
Hmm.
what matters. There's a section in there where you'll actually talk about what you did within that club or organization or activity. So you're going to want to expand on that. That's the most important part. Okay. And this is the part of the application that helps you stand out among other applicants. Mary Beth will be talking actually more about this tomorrow, so I don't want to steal her thunder too early.
I was just going to say that Mary Beth has an amazing presentation tomorrow about finding your passions and how to research them, how to learn about them, how to explore ideas once you have a few. So we'll save that for tomorrow and let her dive into that. And I think that's going to be an awesome presentation. I, like Jen, had a student that I worked with last year. It's different than yours though. Mine only explored two things. And she had two passions and she really dove into them. And I love what you said about depth over breadth and really like diving into things instead of feeling like you have to sign up for everything. Um,
Right.
I know it seems a little odd to talk about summer right now, especially with all of the wild weather that we've been receiving the past couple of weeks from all over
We're
the
dreaming of
country.
summer.
But winter is actually the right time for students to think about how they're going to use their summer. So this is prime time for planning for summers and really particularly important for juniors rising into their senior year. So can you share with us how you help students explore summer possibilities and what are the options available for a student?
Sure. So college admission officers notice how students spend their summers. Okay. It's one of the best indicators of motivation, maturity, curiosity, initiative, and there's a couple of different things that you can engage in over the summer. And I do encourage students to start thinking about this now, and I will tell you why. One of the best ways to explore your field of interest is to attend a summer program, like a leadership or a pre-college experience on a college campus. These programs are popular and many fill up. And the reason we're talking about this now is because some of the deadlines are coming up real soon. Um, these can get costly though. So, if you're able to do that, great. But if not, not a big deal. There's so many other different things you can do. You can take a class over the summer, maybe at your local community college or online. Everybody always thinks that you need to do like an internship over the summer, and those are difficult to get, and you really
There.
don't need to do that. But what you can do is you can consider job shadowing. Start with a family friend or a neighbor that you have that maybe you're interested in physical therapy and you'd like to learn a little bit more about what they do. You got a friendly family friend that is, a physical therapist, ask if you can shadow them for the day. People love
Hmm.
to talk about what they do, so I'm sure they wouldn't mind at all, working with you on that. Another great thing that colleges really love to see is students just having a summer job.
I agree.
It demonstrates work ethic, it demonstrates responsibility, and it doesn't have to be like some lavish, amazing job. You can work at McDonald's, at anything, and plus the extra bonuses, you're making some money. So another thing you can do is volunteer. There's lots of different places, probably in your community, that you can get some volunteer hours in. Some of you need to have those for school anyway, so it's a great way to spend your summer. So there's lots of different things you can do. Just do something, right? Every experience is meaningful. It's not just what you've done, it's what you've learned from that experience. So, I've had some students engage in some really creative experiences over the summer. I don't know, Renee, have you had any that you can think of off the top of your head?
Oh my gosh, for sure. I have had students like I'm always amazed at the things they come up with and they get involved in. Probably last year was probably one of my most unique ones. I had a student that I worked with. I really enjoyed working with the student, and he started a trash can cleaning business in the summer and bought a power washer and put flyers in the neighborhood and ended up cleaning out people's big bins that they wheel to the street. And he did amazing, really started his own business and had someone come and help him, like true entrepreneurial spirit. And I just loved it. I thought it was such a unique take on things, and he was really surprised how busy he was. So that was exciting.
That's great. I need to hire
I
them.
I know, me too. I know you touched on this a little bit, Jen, so we can go through this one fairly quickly, but we do have in here a slide that shows what the Common App activity section looks like. So, if you haven't started tracking, if you're a junior, a parent of a junior, and or really in any grade, I always have students track everything that they've done in high school. I give my students that I work with a Google Doc, and I think you can make a Google Doc, an Excel spreadsheet, spiral notebook, whatever works. But for a student to write down everything that they have been involved in from ninth grade on, this way you can sort of look at it with like a big picture. And, if I'm working with a student who's done all sports and athletics, but has no community service or volunteer work, like I will look at it and say, okay, based on this, let me suggest some things that you can do. Or, hey, you've been involved in this for a while. Maybe you can find a leadership position. And I use that as a springboard for building a resume and for filling out common applications. So can you like just talk through with us about this common apps activity section so students can see how they can define and highlight their interests in the things they've done?
Yes, so and this is what I usually do is I create an activities and awards tracker similar to what you do in a Google Sheet, and it mimics what the Common App looks like. So,
Yes.
students are going to list their position or what their title or whatever it is in the organization. Then they're going to list the organization, but then they have to do a description of what they do. And this is the most important part because this is your chance to shine. This is your chance to talk about what you are doing within this organization rather than just going to a meeting or two. So we spend a lot of time on that in our activities and awards tracker. The thing is, it only gives you 150 characters to be able to
It's
enter
very
that
short.
in. It's very short, so we have to streamline it, and that's something that I work on early with my students. So, and it's great because they get that done no later than probably spring of their junior year because we keep working on it, throughout. If
Hmm.
I start working with a freshman, we check back and look at it and
Yeah.
a couple times and add things to it. But when we're done with it, then we're done with that section of the Common Application. So when the Common App opens up on August 1, what do we do in that section? We just go in and
Copy
copy
and
and paste.
paste.
Yep. So
I
they're
agree.
actually essentially starting their application early, which is
Early. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
yeah.
plan. So now that we've worked on a student's narrative and we've talked about that, we can switch gears to talking about building a college list. And I think a lot of juniors are really in this part of it right now.
Right.
What school should I be considering? Why should I be considering? Do I like them? Do I not? How do you help a student? What kind of questions do you ask them to help them determine what they are looking for in a college, which is really the foundation of starting a possible list?
Right. And that's difficult and it's different for every student. Some students are just not even ready to answer that question yet, and that's okay. I first ask them by just, I just ask them, how do you imagine your college experience? You've thought of college before. What do you picture when you're thinking about going to college? And just things start coming out like, do you want, a school with big sports teams? Do you want certain clubs or activities? Do you
Hmm.
want, small personal classes or large lecture halls? Do you want to be in a big city where there's, vast cultural experiences, or would you rather be in a small town? Do you need to have recreation nearby, like skiing or surfing or whatever? Um, what about how far do you want to go from home? What part of the country do you want to be in? Do you want Greek life, a fraternity or sorority? Is the social scene important to you, or is it not that important to you?
Hmm.
So, there's lots of things to ask.
Right, I agree. I think I ask some of the exact same questions to students. But here's where I think students sort of come up against a roadblock and what makes it stressful for them. What if the answer to some or all of these questions are, I don't know?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really common. And not knowing, and I preface my conversations with them and say, the answer to any of these questions can be, I don't know, and that's completely fine because they almost need to feel safe saying that. So if a student says,
Right.
I don't know, how do you help them start?
Usually what I do is I have them just start close to home. So find a college campus that's nearby, maybe pick one small campus, one large campus, and
Yes.
just set up a campus visit and go tour the campus and just see what you find that you like. Take a notebook with you, jot down some notes, and then after our next session night, we start talking about what did you find that you liked.
Yes. Yes.
And that
Yep.
kind of
That's
gets the ball
perfect.
rolling.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Students often will, if they do come to us with a list, they're often very top heavy, meaning there's a lot of reach schools, a lot of very selective schools on this list. How do you help the 11th graders refine their list so that they're not quite so top heavy?
Well, we want students to have options. Okay, so you've heard this before, we build a balanced list together.
Balance list. Yep.
Right, it's a big one. It's okay to have some reach schools, but let's balance them out with some match and some likely schools as well.
I agree.
So we
I
talk we
agree.
talk about, what would we look at their academic profile. We talk about some schools that would be a little bit more likely to get into based on that school's academic profile. And so they have some options.
Right. And I think the important part about refining the list and building the list is also to block the noise out from your peers and your friends.
Right.
Because your college search journey should be very individual for you. What's important to you is not the same as what's important to your friend. So there's often these like sort of like popular colleges you'll find on everybody's list. So it's always nice to kind of give them suggestions of maybe even a college they've never heard of before and say, hey, I actually think this is a really good fit for you.
Right. Right.
You touched a little bit on campus visits, and I know this is a great time of year for juniors to be planning campus visits, long weekends, spring break. The spring is really around the corner, and many families will start to book these. When scheduling visits, the thing that most people say is, "I'm going to take a tour at this campus," but there's a lot of other things students can do and families can do when they're visiting a college in addition to taking a campus tour. So what kind of things would you suggest?
I've always said that the campus visit is the most important part of the college search process. It's the best way to pick up the vibe of the campus and determine if it's a good fit for you. So, and
Hmm.
I always say it's like test driving a car before you make the investment. So, if you go on a campus visit, of course you're going to take the campus tour. That's what you always think of. But try to schedule some additional things that you're interested in to make the most of your visit. If you're going to drive 2, 3, 4, even longer, hours away, try to get as much out of that visit as you can. And you may need to contact the school to set this up ahead of time if they don't have that option on their website. So if you're interested in checking out the residence halls, ask for a residence hall tour. Ask if they provide that. Look to see if they have an opportunity to meet with a faculty member in your academic department, or sit in on a class, or meet with a coach, or you know, eating in the dining hall, checking out the food on campus. That's always a big one.
Yeah.
And if you can't, like, let's just say you're checking a college out and it's across the country and you just can't make a visit there, at least do a virtual tour. Most colleges now at least offer the virtual tour. You can do that before you apply and then maybe go visit after you find out whether you were admitted.
I think that's such great advice. I actually was just meeting with a junior last night, and we just picked a random college together and started exploring the website so I could show him how to look at different things. And I said, just about everybody has a virtual tour. And we found virtual tours, we found short videos from students on different topics. And he was like, I had no idea this was all out there. So it's a great way to
Oh,
do
great.
research as well.
So great.
Junior year is going to go by fast. And I know like thinking about application deadlines is kind of farther in the process for juniors. But can you just touch base on the differences of these terms? Because sometimes I find students or families are hearing these terms and they don't really even know what they mean. So can you sort of give us a high level of what each of these differences, different application deadlines mean?
It's so confusing. And sometimes I confuse myself, like I've got to jump back, especially when they use the words regular, or I'm sorry, they use the words
Early.
early decision and early action. They're using
Yes.
early twice. I hate that. Okay, so early decision that's the one that's a binding contract. So it can greatly increase your chances of being admitted. Um, and in some cases, we see higher admit rates with early decision applicants, but you have to keep in mind this is a binding contract. So if you apply early decision to a college, you're committing to that college if they admit you. So if you get admitted, you have to withdraw your applications from all the other schools that you're admitted to. So we really have a pretty in-depth conversation with our students before they decide to apply early decision. Then there's early action, which is probably the most popular.
Mhm.
This is basically you apply earlier. Many of those deadlines are in November, November 1st. Some are even earlier than that, but most are usually right around November 1st. You'll get a decision a little bit earlier. And it's also good to apply early action because it shows demonstrated interest to some of these schools that find that important. So I usually tell my students that I've been working with for a while, even if let's just plan to apply early action for our schools, if we have the time to really, work on our applications,
Mhm.
work on our essays and submit a good application. And then there's also regular decisions. So you can apply a little bit later. Those deadlines are later in the year, usually after the first of the year. And it gives students a little bit more time if they need a longer runway to write essays or whatever it is that they need to do.
And
So,
not every college offers all three notification plans. Sometimes it's
right,
only one, sometimes it's two, sometimes it's all three. So once you
right.
have a college list built, you can determine
Right. And
what
we
they
talk this
offer.
through with our students. Like we look at the stats for each school on their college list, and we help them determine like which application plan is maybe the
Yes,
best choice for them for each school.
yes. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I want to go through, we've got one more slide and then we're going to get to the Q&A. So, such a big part of the Common App application is the Common App essay, Common App personal statement. And there's many supplemental essays for colleges as well. These are my favorite part. I love the essays. There's 7 Common App essay prompts and they're typically released in like late February. So the prompts for next year's application cycle haven't come out yet. But in the past, the prompts have not changed very much year to year. So how do you, let's just go high level on this one. How do you help your students pick a topic? That sometimes is the hardest part.
Right. And this is the student's opportunity to showcase their personality, their values, their unique experiences beyond their transcripts and test scores. So, and it gives the admission officers a deeper understanding of who the applicant is as an individual and how they will contribute to their college community. So, it's a chance for you to tell your personal story. So, not all colleges require an essay, but many do. And even if they're optional, I usually tell my students treat optional as required.
I
You want to
agree.
put your best foot forward. But when I meet with my students, usually before we even look at the prompts, we do a little brainstorming activity where they write down things that they value, things that they know a lot about, things that they're good at, things that make them unique. And I usually have them share a favorite story that they like to tell. And then they just start writing. Okay, we create a shared Google Doc and they just start writing. And I tell them at that point, don't worry about flow, grammar, anything. Just start getting everything out on paper. And there is a prompt for pretty much any topic that you can think of. So we usually just write first and then we choose the prompt. There's even a prompt that says, share an essay on a topic that you're already,
Yeah, a
interested
topic of your choice, I think it
in,
says.
your
Yeah.
choice. Right, right.
Yeah. So you can write about anything. I always tell
I
them,
think
don't,
it, I, yeah,
yeah.
and I think it takes away the pressure then, they can
Hmm.
just write about what it shows their authentic self through that,
Right.
writing.
I always say, let's do it backwards. Let's pick
Right.
a topic that you're passionate about because it's going to be easier for you to write and it's going to come through as very authentic. And then once we have it written, we'll see which essay prompt it matches with. So I don't even start with the prompts. I finish with the
Right.
prompts.
Right.
And I think then they feel like, oh, I can write about something I'm interested in. I always say, don't try to write about what you think the admissions committee wants to hear. What they want to hear is what you want to say. I think that's really the right way to go about it. I love your questions, so I'm going to start using some of those questions in meeting with students. Okay, so that sort of concludes our presentation for today. Before we go to Q&A, I want to invite everyone to join us tomorrow for day 2 of College Week, where Mary Beth Lybrand will be joining us, and she's going to talk about how your team can build a compelling narrative. So we're going to really dive deep into the topic that we touched on today. She has some great information to share and also some actual examples. Sometimes it's nice to hear, okay, you should do this, but how do I actually do it? So she is going to share those examples with us.
Mary Beth is
Um,
great. You're gonna love her. She's
oh,
great.
she's
You don't want
amazing.
to miss
Yeah,
it.
I'm super excited to present with her tomorrow. So we are going to share a lot of information with you during College Week, and I know sometimes navigating your child's journey can be really challenging. So if you're feeling confused or overwhelmed, the goal today was to make you feel less stressed. But now if you're like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit more than I was anticipating, please know that you're not alone, and we are definitely here to help. If you want to learn more about the programs that we offer at Educational Connections, you can scan the QR code here and pick a time to meet with one of our education specialists. And they're all amazing. Really great about talking with families through your child and what their needs are and helping connect them to the best college counselor, executive function coach, tutor, whatever it may be that you need. Jen, before we go to Q&A, are you still accepting students, new students to your roster if there's any families who would like to work with you?
Absolutely. And now's the
Amazing.
time. If you have a junior, now's the time to get started. So
I
send them
agree.
my way.
All right. And are you taking on 8th through 10th graders as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'm
Okay,
definitely taking them all on. Yep.
great. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to switch to the Q&A and let's get started. I'm going to just start right up at the top. And maybe, Jen, you and I can sort of alternate or take turns answering these. So I'm going to tackle the first one. To what extent does a 504 for anxiety challenges impact a student's application? Should the student mention anxiety in their application or essay? It's a great question. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly here about not only anxiety, but any sort of ADHD, learning differences, anything that will fall under those categories. And, when I'm working with students, I always tell them, you want to share what you're comfortable with. I think these are very personal decisions for students, whether they share that information or not. But I will tell you, as a past admissions officer, I'm going to speak from that side of the desk right now, is that whenever students shared this information on the application, it was never held against them and was always served as explanation and not as an excuse. So I like when students provided information about, here's exactly with what, I am struggling with or dealing with. Here's how it impacted my grades. Here's some explanation about maybe why I didn't take a foreign language, or maybe why I chose this class, or maybe why my grades dipped. So there's a lot of different things that you can provide, but there's some great sections on the Common App, both the additional information section and the challenges and circumstances that will allow a student to share this information. Okay, Jen, I'm going to toss you the second one. If a student
Okay.
graduates from high school with an associate's degree, does that limit them in college entrance?
Does it limit them? Not, no, I don't think so. I think it's great. It depends on the school as to what they're going to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Every school is different. There's a lot of times that the answer to the questions are it depends because every
Yes.
college is different.
Yes.
Some will accept certain classes to transfer over, some will not. I don't necessarily think it will hurt the student at all. So
Right. I
it kind of gives them
agree.
a nice little jump.
Yeah, I would say in working with students in the past who have taken, there's a lot of students who will take dual enrollment and take classes at community college. The important piece of the puzzle, and not 100% of the time, but the important piece of the puzzle is typically not to take those classes after graduation from high school, because that's what will turn you into a transfer applicant. If you're taking those classes while you're still in high school, you're still considered a first year applicant to colleges. And that's important. Many students think, oh, I want to apply as a transfer to show them what kind of things I've done. But you want to apply as a first year or freshman or first year applicant because you want to be given first year housing and you want to be in the first year orientation. So those two things can be impacted if you apply as a transfer student. So most colleges will not consider you a transfer applicant until you have taken classes post graduation from high school. I used to be a transfer counselor too, so that one's a little close to my heart. If a student's interested in the humanities, law, education, history, languages, how crucial are high-level math courses? My child, for interest, started in high school in algebra as in geometry as a 10th grader, and will have algebra 2 trig as an 11th grader, and wonder if he should double stack AP pre-calc or AP stats in his senior year to show rigor. You want to tackle that?
It depends. It
Yes.
depends on what the student's major is. It depends on how selective the school is. Colleges want to see you challenging yourself as much as possible, but they also want to make sure that you want to make sure that you're doing well in those classes. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
it would depend on what his major is. Some depending on the major, like if he's thinking about going into business, stats
Right.
might be more important anyway than the pre-calc.
Correct.
Or if he's
Correct.
thinking of engineering, then probably pre-calc. So
Mm-hmm.
it just depends on the major and
Right.
activity of the
Right. I
school.
agree. I think I'm going to tackle this next one because it's about homeschoolers, and I've done a lot of work with homeschooled students. But happy to hear if you have any information you want to chime in. Is there anything you can say for homeschoolers that would be great? There isn't an official transcript. Any suggestions? Do you recommend dual enrollment? So for homeschool students, typically the student will need to get a transcript through. Every homeschool association is different. But oftentimes, when we were reading homeschool applicants, they would have a transcript. They do have some grades, even if it was graded by a parent, and that is acceptable. They do need to certify actual graduation through typically their home district, so that they can receive federal aid as a college student. So there are pieces of the puzzle that are important. In working with homeschool students, I do recommend dual enrollment if they can, because it will help show some consistency and what they can see from other students. And if they're taking a college level course, that's a very good indication to the college that they can do well in college. And then the last piece of the puzzle I suggest for homeschool students is to submit test scores, SAT or ACT, because that really does give a nice standardized form of testing that can really show academic potential to an admissions officer. How about volunteering, Jen? Is volunteering important, and what kind is one kind better than another?
Colleges love to see students volunteer. They love to see the community service. And they're hoping that students will continue that too when they get to their campus. So there's not really one in particular that's, one kind that's more important than another. I have had students before, if they're interested, I have a student that's interested in becoming a veterinarian. I said, maybe consider, volunteering with a wildlife rescue, uh, uh, organization, or contacting a veterinarian office or work for the Humane Society. Stumbling over my
Mm-hmm.
words here. So sometimes if you're kind of gauging it toward maybe your major, that's a good idea. But really, just any type of volunteer or service work is really colleges love to see that.
Great. And then I'm just going to answer this one quick. How do colleges view non-school activity versus in school? Both important.
Right.
really not significant one over the other. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. They're really coming in fast and furious, and I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions, and then I'll remind everyone that on Thursday we have the live Q&A, so that if you have any additional questions you want to share, then we can tackle them then. Okay. When are early action deadlines are typically by early November? When are early decision deadlines? Those are sometimes November 1st, but they can be earlier. Usually October 15th would be the earliest. I think occasionally I might see an October 1st, but October 1st, October 15th, and um, November 1st are the most popular. All right, Melissa's answering some questions about um, ADHD, and we're going to tackle some of those questions about the testing for those students on Wednesday. And okay, so let's tackle this one. Question in increase in number of applications. Because students are applying to more colleges, it's not a surprise that the number of applications has increased, but presumably the number of students applying that you are in competition with is more or less the same, right? Great question. So, with the number of applications that are increasing at colleges, what is happening now is that colleges are having more students who look the same academically. So their applicant pools are increasing, but the number of students who look very similar academically is growing. So to make it very, like, these numbers are very small, but imagine that you have 10 spaces left and you have 100 students who look the same academically. How do you decide which one of those students are going to be admitted for those spaces? And that is different for every school and what's important to them in their application process. And things like demonstrated interest, personal narrative, that's when all of those things become very important. Okay, we're at 50 minutes, so I want to close it down here. And want to also make sure that everyone knows that we will be on for the rest of the week. And if you have additional questions, we'll see you on Thursday. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I was super excited for today, and it feels great to have the first one under our belt, and looking forward to talking with Mary Beth tomorrow. So thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.